Hello, I'm Casey Aiken. This is 21 This Week. Coming up next, MCPS 8th grade math scores plummet again. Maryland Board of Education recommends holding back third graders who failed their reading tests. Angela Alsobrooks chooses Tony DC Private School for daughter instead of Prince George's County Public Schools. And blue wave, red wave, blue wall predictions for the upcoming elections. Our panel of insiders will give you the story behind the story. We're joined by former County Council member and CEO of SkillSmart, Mike Knapp, and Vice Chairman of the Montgomery County Republican Central Committee, Stacey Sauter. Stay tuned for these stories and more on the next 21 This Week. A new report by the Maryland Comprehensive Assessment Program should be causing alarm bells to be ringing in Rockville at MCPS headquarters. This report, which compares MCPS efficiency with the other Maryland public school systems, where once MCPS was considered one of the best, now 8th grade math hits are last place, while many other subjects of MCPS ranks among the bottom 5 of the school systems. Mike, the results of this assessment are quite revealing. MCPS students perform quite well through the 5th grade, but drop off dramatically in the middle school years. What contributes to such a disappointing turnaround?
Well, it's interesting. I actually went back and looked at the assessments, and I'm not sure exactly the document that you had pulled up and shared, but the reality is that, yes, our test scores aren't where we want them to be, but all of the categories I looked at were actually above the state average. So I think everyone acknowledges that we're not where we want to be. And one of the big changes that's already taken place this year is we have a new superintendent. And so I think there's an acknowledgement that we're not where we need to be. And we need to really double down on how we're kind of beginning to address many challenges within MCPS. One of the challenges I know we're continuing to confront is just recognizing the diversity in our school system and making sure that we've got the tools in place that all learners can be met where they are and ultimately be successful. And I know that just this past week, the new superintendent met with the Black and Brown Coalition to begin to explore ways and the concerns that they have representing African-American and Latino families and making sure that the tools are in place to help their students thrive. And so we're not where we need to be. I think there's an acknowledgement we're not where we need to be. And I think that at least steps are being taken under new leadership to begin moving in the right direction.
Okay, I'll come back to one of those points that you just made, Mike, in a second. But Stacey, there are those that want to kind of slough this off and suggest that this manifestation in middle schools is attributed to the remote learning programs during COVID. It is nothing to be alarmed about. I mean, what do you say?
Casey, what do they mean this is nothing to be alarmed about? This is a 5-alarm fire with innocent children in burning buildings. The one job these administrators and teachers are in place to do is to help these children reach their fullest potential. And so truly, what difference does it make if it's COVID, remote learning, social media, or any other distraction of being a teenager in general? It's a major problem and one that's been festering for a long time. And our political leaders treat Maryland like an ever and overflowing honeypot, I think. And particularly in Montgomery Sanctuary County, we have a steady infusion of non-English speaking migrants, both legal and illegal, into the system who increase class sizes and require greater resources, time, attention, and money. So we've also seen a flight of many well-qualified teachers who are feeling fed up with the current system and are leaving. So at what point do we, the tax-paying citizens, say enough and demand a change in the system that is solely focused on rigorous academics and truly preparing our children for life? I'll close by saying, what more do we need to know about this? Then Maryland is now taking lessons from Mississippi on how to improve our once vaunted school system.
Well, you bring up an interesting point, Stacey, and Mike brought this up as well. I mean, the fact is, parents are becoming very frustrated. Mike pointed out about the Black and Brown Coalition meeting that was held this week, but it seems that all parents are becoming frustrated with the system. But we have an election in 10 days, and there are several Board of Education members that are going to be re-elected because they're on the Apple ballot. When are Montgomery County parents going to vote their choices? That's what I want to know.
Actually, Casey, none of the incumbents were endorsed by the Apple ballot. So, and interestingly, I'll be curious to see who gets elected. None of the Apple ballot candidates are incumbents, and so the question will be, what are people looking at and what are people evaluating as they elect Board of Ed members? Are they looking for experience? Are they looking for new perspective? And I think that'll be very interesting to see. But I agree. I think there is frustration. I think the fact that we are among the most diverse communities in the country is not a negative, Stacey. We've been among the most diverse communities in the country for the last 25 years. And in fact, we've unfortunately not kept the gains that we'd made in the early 2000s, where we recognized that and really had put programs in place, and unfortunately have had backsliding. And I think we've seen that as a result of changes in leadership. And I think it's acknowledged now that we've got to, finally, I think we're getting to the point where leadership is recognizing the changes had to be made and are moving in that direction. They're nowhere near where they need to be. I mean, to your point, it's a challenge, it's a crisis, and we've got to address it. And we're well positioned to be able to do it, but you've got to buckle down and really focus on it. And I think the next year is going to be really compelling to see what's happened.
Well, there is an outstanding candidate in Brenda Diaz, and Brenda Diaz takes the academics more seriously probably than any of the others do in terms of having a hardcore academic curriculum. And she's an educator. She's incredibly intelligent and talented as a teacher. I think that she would serve Montgomery County quite well. Mike, my comments are not to say that we don't want or desire diversity here. Diversity is, I think, a great positive for Montgomery County. The problem that we're seeing, and it's not just here, but it's across the country right now, is that we've had this mass infusion of illegal immigrants. Montgomery County is not immune to that. And so, when you're inviting people to come here and they get the benefits and they come and they take advantage of our school system, as well they should, these children need to be educated, it's straining our resources. And at what point, to my point, is when do we ask the question, when is enough enough? Can we please take care of the hardworking tax-paying citizens here in Montgomery County first?
And I think that's exactly where the focus is. And I think we need to make sure that we're addressing the right tools to adequately meet the needs of our growing diverse population, wherever they're coming from, however they're getting here, because that's our commitment.
Well, that's a great segue into our next part of our topic for Mike and for Stacey, which is, the Maryland State Education Superintendent Carrie Wright has proposed a controversial program for holding back third graders from advancing to fourth grade if they aren't proficient in reading. The idea being that one can't function in our society if they're not proficient in reading by the end of the third grade. Mike, what do you think of this proposal?
Well, I think if you're going to be serious, you have to be serious. And so this is a way to show that we as a state are paying attention to this and actually putting the right mechanisms in place. Interestingly, to Stacey's point, Dr. Wright started here. She was an MCPS associate superintendent before she went to Mississippi. And so, yes, we're learning from Mississippi, but Mississippi learned from us first, and we're bringing back those learnings and actually putting the leader in place that we need to make sure that our third graders are reading. The one thing that's interesting about what's been proposed is it's not carte blanche. If you haven't passed, that you're held back. You have to get, there's a consent element that parents can actually approve moving their children to fourth grade but acknowledge that they need to have additional supports if that's in fact the case, if they haven't met the requirements to read at a third grade level. So it's not as though that they're all held back and that's the only option that there is. But I think if you're going to be serious, we have to put real requirements in place, and that's going to hold teachers accountable, and it's going to hold parents and families and students accountable. And I don't think that's a bad thing.
So that leads to the question I was going to ask you, Stacey, is, there is a parent buy-in part of this program, but there's also a teacher buy-in that has to be imposed. So are these? This is a relatively controversial program because many complaints are that the socialization of the children will be harmed if they're held back. What's your feeling on this?
First of all, I agree with many of Mike's points. And I really believe that this is something that should be given a shot if it means even one child has a better shot at life. And third grade is a real launching pad into deeper learning in subsequent years. But I can see the clashes arising between parents and teachers over this. And I recall with great clarity when I was a kid, that those kids that were held back were pretty badly stigmatized, pretty sad. My personal concerns are, as previously stated, if more resources are going to English as a second language students, then would children who would otherwise perform to standards be unnecessarily dragged down by lack of resources and attention? And then would they be held back or at risk of being held back? I can see parents fighting this. And I also worry that some third grade teachers might use this as a crutch and a cudgel. Still, it's really hard to handicap this without giving it a try. And I think it's worth a try.
Well, we're going to our hard break, but the solution, which I think is universally should be accepted, is that the voucher system should be in place so the parents can make a choice as to what schools they want to go to and where they want to spend their tax dollars. When we come back from this short break, will Angela Alsobrooks' decision to send her daughter to an exclusive DC private school hurt her politically? And early voting in Maryland has begun. Which candidate has the big mo going into the final days? Stay tuned.
Jordan knows he shouldn't eat this entire bowl of nachos, but tonight he's earned that right because a few hours ago in the middle of happy hour, he recognized a sign, not from the gods or a bolt of lightning, but from a double heart, a kissy face, and a fourth ha in ha ha ha. That's when Jordan knew he was buzzed. So when it was time to go, he got a ride home instead of driving. Be a legend like Jordan. Recognize your buzzed warning signs and get a ride home. Buzz driving is drunk driving.
When I first saw Turtle, my heart was full. Not anything but lonely.
We had this deep connection, this heart connection.
He just wants to be close to you and part of your life.
Every day with Turtle is a perfect day.
When I'm holding her, it makes me feel calmer.
I think everything he does shows how much he loves us.
When we adopt a shelter pet,
we discover
they're a little bit of a lot of things,
but they're all pure love.
And welcome back. In the race for the U.S. Senate seat in Maryland, polls consistently show that Prince George's County Executive Angela Alsobrooks is leading former Maryland Governor Larry Hogan by a significant margin in some and not so significant in others. But in a race that many consider close, each campaign is looking to gain an advantage and a disadvantage to the other side. The revelation several weeks ago that Alsobrooks was receiving tax credits that she was not entitled to seemed to stall her campaign a bit. And Stacey, this week it was revealed that Miss Alsobrooks sent her daughter to a very expensive private grade school and high school in the District of Columbia rather than to Prince George's County schools. Is this going to hurt her politically?
Cue the music. A tale as old as time, with politicians sending their children to private instead of public schools. We've seen it in every modern president, and it doesn't surprise me that Miss Alsobrooks would also do the same. She's probably trying to do the best thing possible for her child. Could it hurt her? Maybe. If nothing else, it's a very high-level indictment of the PG school system. And by the way, do you remember when I stated on your show a couple of months ago that if she stumbles, I believe it will be because Governor Moore stuck out his foot to trip her up. I have no proof of this, but I'm just wondering how CNN became so clever about her property tax issue when they did. And now all of a sudden getting, close to the very end here, why is the school issue suddenly percolating? It doesn't come from the Hogan camp. So I'm just wondering if she could steal his thunder if she ends up in the U.S. Senate, and maybe there's a little bit of this background information being fed.
Well, it's the Game of Thrones intrigue, right? I mean, we all love that, right? That's what we're here for. And Mike, I didn't have a great admiration for President Jimmy Carter, but one of the things that he did do was he sent his daughter to DC public schools when he first became president. So isn't this just really an issue about trust and political leadership, and that a leader should make a first step when speaking to their constituents?
Well, I think that, as Stacey said, parents make decisions that are best for their children, and I think that's an important thing. And honestly, I am a strong and staunch public school advocate. I have siblings that are teachers. My wife has siblings that are teachers. We have grown up in the system. Our children have all gone through a public school system. I strongly believe in it. But I also know that there are a lot of folks who, for a variety of reasons, have recognized that that may not be best for them. And is that the choice I would make? It's not. And so it's very difficult, though, I think, to question why people have identified that as a best path for their child. I don't know when the decision was made, but I'm not even sure she was county executive when her daughter went to high school. So I'm pretty sure that didn't necessarily factor into the calculation at that point. And
but she was an elected official at that point. She was state's attorney.
Yeah, she may have been. And so the reality is that, but she wasn't responsible for the school system. I don't know the decision why she made the decision for her child, and I'm not going to question that. Can people make it an issue? Sure, people make an issue over lots of things. I'm pretty sure that it wasn't Governor Moore that raised the issue, though. But that notwithstanding.
Well, it doesn't have to be him directly, Mike. It could have come from one of his underlings.
I'm pretty sure it wasn't anybody from that team. I'm pretty sure that their team is pretty committed to getting County Executive Alsobrooks elected to the U.S. Senate. But it's always fun to add the intrigue for the conversation. But I think that Prince George's schools continue to improve. Are they where they need to be? I don't think any school system is where it needs to be. I think we're seeing lots of challenges, and I think to continue to focus on how we make sure our children are well equipped to thrive in an environment that is ever changing is a real challenge today. And so that's where I think we are.
Well, we'll leave it at that. I won't ask your predictions on the race itself. Early voting started today, yesterday, on the 24th, and I'm looking forward to getting out and casting my ballot sometime this afternoon. Now we're going to go into our last topic, and you have to admit that historically this has been one of the crazier election cycles of our lifetime. The incumbent president of the United States, Joe Biden, after proclaiming that he would never pull out of the race, decides to pull out of the election willingly or unwillingly, depending on who you want to choose. The former president of the United States, Donald Trump, seems to be running on a platform of I did it once, I can do it again. And then, oh, by the way, he's had 2 assassination attempts on his life. And finally, Vice President Kamala Harris seems to be running because she isn't either Joe Biden or Donald Trump. What a mess. So, Mike, how do you assess this election? I'll give you the first crack at it.
Oh, I got a first crack at this. Honestly, it's a real challenge. I continue to be astounded at the percentage of the American public who is willing to listen to the former president and, the vitriol that is put out there, the hate that he spews, the mistruths. And it doesn't make a difference. This past week, General Kelly, his former chief of staff, called out some of the conversations that occurred. And in fact, I think people who support Donald Trump double down as a result of that. I mean, here's a person who is the highest ranking official we have in the military. His son, he actually lost his son who served in the military, and former President Trump actually belittled that. I mean, I wonder, and we just sit here, and yet there are people who think that that's perfectly fine and are willing to vote for him. And I honestly don't understand. And so I think you've got Vice President Kamala Harris, who has done a nice job of running a very good campaign in a very short amount of time, has laid out a really clear agenda, a very strong, stark contrast to what we see from former President Trump. And I think there are a lot of people working hard on her behalf. I think there's momentum, but there are 7 states where this is going to be, it's going to come down to a small number of votes, and that's where we're going to be.
All right, Stacey, now it's your turn.
Oh, thank you. Does anybody here remember Rosie Ruiz? She was the female winner in the 1980 Boston Marathon who blasted by the other competitors in the last mile of the race, and 8 days later was stripped of her title because it turned out she had ridden the subway to victory. In my opinion, Kamala Harris is the Rosie Ruiz of politics. She bypassed all the other potential primary contenders, and like Rosie, who literally limped off with the support of police officers, looking the part there after winning. Kamala is claiming that she's the underdog in this race. Good God help us. Well, we're in the final stretch here, and it has become increasingly apparent, at least to me, that she took the subway, so to speak. And it'll be interesting to see in this final stretch how this plays out. I mean, she's being pushed as hard as she can by every celebrity. And, I'm like, good luck. If she's not properly conditioned for the campaign rigors and likely not then likely not the presidency, I just feel like we can do better.
Well, that's a great thing about not only this election, but all elections, is that you feel like the other guy isn't up to the job, and that, I guess that's part of the equation that you put in, and you cast aspersions on the other side. So it'll be interesting to see how it turns out. Mike, any final thoughts?
God help us.
Well, I think we all feel that way, that we all want the best for our country, and we all believe that our candidate, whoever that might be, is the guy that is the person who will best serve our country. Stacey, any final thoughts?
All I can say of it is that I've been out door knocking and working the polls already, doing a number of things involved every day in many different ways. And I am seeing, I can't say specifically, but compared to other years, I'm seeing an uptick in people that are asking for that Republican sample ballot, that people are really excited to get out there and vote. And there are some really important initiatives that they're addressing as well. We've got the school board races, as we talked about earlier. So there are some down ballot candidates and issues that are really important to voters this year. So if anybody has not registered to vote and would like to do so, I think there's still a little bit of time left, maybe, just a couple of days left where they can possibly do that. Please, if you've gotten a mail-in ballot, mail it in.
Well, I've got an exit question for both of you, and it kind of it may be unfair, but so I'm going to ask it anyway. Mike, if President Trump is reelected, will Democrats accept the election results?
I don't think that's ever been in question. I think the Democrats have always said that we will accept the election results. I think we'll be very frustrated by that outcome if that's in fact the case. Unfortunately, it's been the Republican side that said they won't accept the results unless they like the results they see.
Well, let's ask Stacey the same question, which is if Vice President Harris wins the election, will Republicans accept the results?
I'm not going to hypothesize on that, but Mike, to your point, would you please look at what happened with Hillary Clinton? You can look at Stacey Abrams. This is all in recent history where the Democrats have challenged the turnout of the election. So there's a history of this and of sore losers. And I think that, the Democratic Party, I should add that. And so I don't think it's fair to say that this is something that is unique to the Republicans when.
Well, it is when the current Republicans still won't acknowledge that the former president didn't win the last election.
Well, you know what? We're going to have to leave it there, Mike, because we're going to see in 10 days who actually is successful and who's victorious. So thank you both for those thoughts. When we come back, parting shots.
Hey world, I have a quick message. It's about safe driving. All right, let's go. Anytime you're driving, have the seatbelt buckled tight. Both hands on the wheel and your phone out of sight. Well, not in your hand trying to text somebody back. Because if you do, your car might get smacked. The moral of the story, just put your phone down. The people on the road will stay safe and sound. Put your phone down, put your phone down. People on the road will stay safe and sound. Yeah.
If I could go back and change it all, I would. I think I'm gonna miss you the most. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Maybe it's just the little moments. If I could go back and change it all, if I could go back, I would. But I can't.
Now with party shots, Mike Knapp.
Well, it's early voting time in Montgomery County and in the state of Maryland. And I think this is a critical election, both nationally and locally. And I would just urge everyone to make sure that they take the time to understand the issues they're voting for and to make sure that they make time to get out and actually vote.
Well, thank you, Mike. Stacey Sauter, your parting shot.
Well, thank you, Casey, and thank you for having me on the show. And Mike, it's always a pleasure to be on here with you. I would like to thank all of these people who have gotten out so far and have been doing the hard work with the Republican Party. We've had a very strong ground game in this election. I'm really looking forward to seeing what the results of our efforts have been from the past 18 months. And I would encourage everybody, even if you don't like a particular candidate on the ballot, that you should go and vote for the other issues and other candidates. If you need a sample ballot from the Republican Party, we're happy to provide you with that. But it is really your civic duty to get out there and vote. And we thank you for that and for your participation.
Great. Thank you, Stacey. And I want to thank you, Mike, for both of you for appearing this week. And I want to thank the audience for tuning in each and every week to Montgomery County's hardest hitting political talk show. For 21 this week, I'm Casey Aiken.